I came in directly down from DP-20. When I drove in, I parked at DP-20 and all the structural protection group was there at the time. I visited with them for a few minutes. My medic team that was assigned with our firing group, different folks, we had different individuals each day, but the paramedic team, I started walking down, I talked to the paramedic team, and there's a pitch on the main line that they had been burning the night before. And I said, I don't want you going any farther down from here. Stay here. If we need you, we'll call you. And just knowing how rugged this country was, we could bring them down if we needed them. So I continued off down the hill, and I hit the top of the slop over and started following it around. And Pete from Plumas and Todd were there, and they were working a heavy helicopter. I think shortly thereafter, I visited with them for a minute, continued around the slop over, met with a couple folks in the bottom of the slop, and then I followed the trail down, which ties directly into H4. And going back to Jason's point, that was the first time we had any idea that there were hell attack on H4. We had a trigger point that this entire line would be no longer viable if we had fire cross into that confluence down below.
Once Chris found that there were hell attack here, then that started all the conversations, and we found out that H6 farther down the line was staffed and others, and so then that information was relayed back to start getting all those people off of those spots that we didn't want them out there.
When I came into the aspen stand that morning, again, first time I had seen Augusta on the hill. The foreman from Augusta was down in the aspen stand at the bottom end of the slop over. Two other individuals from the hotshot crews. We visited for a few minutes, and again, I was really worried about that backside, and said, hey, if something gets established below us, we'll use this, we'll go up into this black, and we'll follow the burnout operation from the previous night, which that's what I had walked down that morning. So I knew that was good. There were a couple spots that were not great black, but as you get up into there, it turns into ponderosa, and so it was a nice understory burn. Didn't have to worry about reburn through that piece. By and large, there were a couple spots that were short, but in any case, said, hey, if we've got an issue and we're working this slop over, we'll get up through this black and move our way up to DP-20, and that's our essential escape route at that point. As all four crews got engaged, Plumas was the top crew, and then Lassen, and then Augusta, and then Flag had the bottom end of the slop over. Shortly after the crews, all four were engaged, Plumas called and said, hey, we could really use some water on this upper end. We had the structural protection group that was parked right at the top of this line, and so called the structural protection group and asked them if they could go ahead and start plumbing it, which they did quite rapidly. They started bringing hose down and started plumbing it all the way down, and then they started getting water to Plumas and Lassen on the top end of the slop over. Fire activity was picking up a little bit on the slope, which really wasn't a factor for the resources that we had on the ridge. But shortly after they got it in, with the activity that was picking up, and I think it was shortly around that time that we got a weather update, and they were updating it to a Haines 6, and they were calling it a Super 6, that it was going to be extremely unstable. And about that time, we were noticing a little bit of fire that was, again, not a factor for us, but kind of right up at the mouth of this drainage, really starting to pick up. And although structural protection really wasn't ours, that's where I had parked, that's where I knew folks were, and so I called them and I asked all the structural protection folks that were on this line to go ahead and pack up, head back up, and start moving out of DP-20.
Right in there, I went in, looked at H4. A lot of the brush that had been cut had been thrown off on the fire side, and then all the way around the point. And the duff layer had been left. There was a couple of rotten logs and stuff. So I called one of the flag saw teams to come down, and they got with the helitack people that were there, and they started clearing off the rotten logs, trying to move stuff farther down off the edge.
The smoke was starting to obscure our view of what we had considered as a trigger point for this entire line to be viable. And so we had called Air Attack and asked them to take a look and validate whether or not it's first crossed the trigger point. Said it hadn't crossed the trigger point. Then we called again and asked about, if it was down in the bottom anywhere. And both of us, I think we didn't really say it either way of we were uncomfortable, but I think I sensed that I was a little uncomfortable because Air Attack was a little bit high, and so there was a heavy helicopter with a bucket working in the area, and we called them and asked them to look as well, and so he was able to get down lower than what Air Attack was. But at that point, still nothing had crossed the drainage. As we were standing here, remember we had already moved everybody up the hill from the structure protection group, and we see two individuals walking down the main line that was put in. They had big packs that were fairly, loaded down. You could tell that it was awkward walking down that slope, and as they started coming down the slope, and they hit right about the bottom end of the lower hand line on the slop over, and first I thought, well, maybe they're going to want to start plumbing the bottom. I can't remember exactly how that all shook out, but both of us assumed based on the big packs that they were structure protection group. So we immediately called back up to structure protection group and said, hey, you need to get your folks off the line. They communicated back that all their individuals were accounted for, and they were all the way up at Riggs Lake. And we kept going back and forth trying to account for these two folks because we couldn't get direct communication with them. We were assuming that maybe they were on Division Echo channel, maybe they were on the Fire Group channel. We couldn't figure out who they were. But this whole time, they're moving down, and it's almost slow motion watching these guys just lumber down through the saddle, back up, and climbing up to the point where we were at the time.
So what I was doing was, from that lookout point right there, I could see that'd be the west side of that saddle right there, and I could see this saddle right here. So I was watching that. I thought that would be an indicator of if the wind shifted. We were going to have winds that were going to come in here and possibly do a sort of a down slope thing. And then I was watching this whole slope right out in here that for all the fire behavior, and just seeing if it was picking up. There was some torching going on, a little bit of multiple tree torching, group torching going on, but everything looked real benign. It was real light smoke. There wasn't anything real heavy going on. Nothing seemed like it was moving around. It was a jagged edge down in there, just where it sort of rolled out, made its way down. A little bit of fire over here underneath this big rock knob right here, and nothing to really indicate that we were going to have like a major event. And I looked out at the line, and I looked down here and saw all the people standing down here, and maybe that took 5 seconds, looked back, and there was the downhill run. It was about maybe 300 yards wide, and really cranking.